What's the worst case of bad parenting you've ever witnessed? We offered to rent a room to a buddy of ours while he was going through his divorce. I walked into the kitchen to find his daughter, 7 years old, asking me to feed her because she's hungry. I was the only other person home. So I fed her and called him to see where the hell he was at. He was at the bar. He left his daughter at home. Told no one. Parents who give soda to their babies/toddlers in bottles. The same parents who wonder why the kid needs 5 tooth extractions after the cavities set into their baby teeth. I know a kid who's an only child. His parents do everything for him. Plate his food. Cut it up for him, etc. His mom doesn't work, so she puts everything into taking care of this guy. The problem is that she still talks and interacts with him like he's 5 years old. As a result, he's this super sheltered, socially awkward 13-year-old. Talking to him, you'd think he was 9. I feel bad for the guy. He's about to go into high school and I can already tell he's going to be one of those weird kids. Saw a little girl fall down the stairs at a ski resort. She was clearly having trouble carrying her skis and poles. Father proceeds to scream at her. "What are you doing? Those are expensive." Then he just stood there impatiently huffing as she picked herself up, awkwardly trying to carry her skis and poles and running after him looking ashamed. When working in a box store about 10 years ago, a customer reported to me that they found a kid tied to a clothing rack. The mother had used her child leash to tie up her kid in an isolated corner while she shopped. We untied the kid, took him to my manager, and promptly called the cops. It was about 15 years ago when I was in high school. We were all coming out of school and a woman was passing by with a 5-year-old boy. The child seemed a bit overwhelmed by the crowds of people all of a sudden surrounding him and went to grab his mother's hand. The mother wouldn't hold his hand and instead started yelling at him, "Don't you worry, baby. In about 10 years all these girls will be dropping their panties for you." The poor kid looked so scared and confused. I've never forgotten that line or that kid's face. So disturbing to see. I've posted this story before, but my friend wanted an iPod when they first came out. He saved his money for nearly a year to buy his own. When his parents took him to buy it, his little sister started throwing a tantrum because she wanted one too. His parents bought her one just to shut her up. I was going to pick up takeout food around after school time. There was a lady and a small boy around 5 to 6 standing by the parking lot. The boy was drinking a Coke. When then he turned and tossed it about 15 feet over by a tree. He looked at me and I said, "Are you just going to leave that there?" His mother whipped around and asked me if I was talking to her son. I replied that I was asking him if it was his intention to leave his litter by the tree. She went off about not talking to her child. There was a back and forth for about 15 seconds. Meanwhile, the boy, realizing he was wrong, went to go pick up the can. The mom firmly told him no. But he said it's okay and walked over, picked up the can and walked back to his mom. She snatched it out of his hand and promptly threw it back by the tree, stared me down and dragged the boy across the street. I know a few parents who refuse to say no to their children, giving them everything they want. You only have apple juice in the house but they want fruit punch? We'll go to the store and get it right then. It's ridiculous that the kids run the house. Knew a guy in high school whose mom ducked one of his friends after getting too drunk one night. While we were in high school, she also taught him that it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. His mom would buy us alcohol all the time. We were 16. He would have to pick her up from bars from the age of 13 because she was too smashed to drive herself home. Back then I thought she was the coolest. Looking back, I realized that she was just a terrible mother and a pretty horrible person overall. Being at the autopsy of the 2-year-old who pulled a dresser down on himself because the parents were napping, aka faded from drugs. Oh. And he wasn't crushed. It was positional asphyxiation. So he stayed there and suffocated for about 5 minutes. Alone and panicking. The thing with adult autopsies is the visual weight of the open torso. A bright red open rib cage. A child is different. The head is much bigger proportionally. The greatest visual weight was actually his mop of blonde hair on his big round head. Very distressing. I think about him most days. This woman, who I assumed was the little girl's grandma, kept dunking her granddaughter underwater at a hotel pool despite the girl's constant screaming and crying. Totally oblivious to the fact that it was disturbing the entire hotel. I used to work at Chuck E. Cheese. And boy, I saw a lot of bad parenting. A lot of people would use Chuck E. Cheese as a free babysitting service, since it was technically free to get in. And they would actually take naps at the tables, not buy tokens for their kids. This would happen all the time. And since I worked the floor and fixed the games, I would often just give these kids some tokens so they could at least play a couple of games. Bad stuff went down at Chuck E. Cheese. One time a dad pulled a knife on another dad because he thought that he stole his daughter's tickets. Couple people from different parts of my life. A girl I worked with briefly was one of the most memorable. She was a few years older than me, and completely manipulated by her mother. If her mom didn't want her to come to work, she'd call out to do whatever her mother wanted her to do that day. Whether it be drive her around or stick around at home to clean the house while her mom watched. If her mom thought she was faking anything, sickness or whatever she should have called out for, she'd come in and be terrified to be sent home. She once hid from the director for 2 days while she had the flu because she knew she'd be forced to go home if she was seen. I have no idea why she was so dependent on her mother. But eventually her mom got upset when she was asked to come in on a day she wasn't scheduled, and told the girl to quit. Hadn't seen her since. Working in a supermarket, I saw a woman with her 3-year-old who was toddling around. The mom said to the child, "Go get some salt," and the daughter eagerly toddled over to grab some. She brought back a bag of salt and the mom loudly screamed, "Not that one, you cunt," in front of a whole load of people in the aisle and store. My mouth just dropped open. It was so surreal. I informed the security guys, but I don't know if anything came of it. The barrier to entry for parenthood is so low. Had a student that grew up in a foster care home with 62 dogs. I was told after CPS intervened she would bark and crawl like a dog. This was a middle school aged child, mind you. When I met her, she spoke English for the most part but was extremely quiet. When she was upset, she would bark at other students occasionally. Last night I spent 2 hours in the hospital with a 14-year-old girl that tried to kill herself. Because I know both of her parents are duck-ups and couldn't be there for one shitty reason or another. But I was there because she needed someone. Her mom is a drunk 24/7 and works second shift. Hasn't been there as a parent in years. The dad is on the run from the law and not allowed in the state she lives in. She is one of the smartest and coolest kids ever. It shouldn't have to come to this for her. She deserves a real adult, an actual functioning person in her life. My cousin was never told the word no growing up if she didn't want to do something. She wasn't made to do it. It started when she was 2 years old and didn't want soap with her bath. As a child, they would let her interrupt any conversation they were having instead of telling her to wait. Things like this went on for nearly 20 years. The end-up result is Persona, who is now in her mid-20s and doesn't use soap to bath. She smells. We've talked to her about it. She's difficult to have a conversation or really any sort of interaction with her because she doesn't fully understand the concept of no. This also results in her being unable to hold a job even though she has a master's. She just gets in arguments with her bosses without realizing it and is then let go for unprofessional behavior. My husband and I took my sister-in-law and our 11-year-old nephew to Warwick Castle a few years ago. We were walking around and saw this family. The child was about 13/14 and was overweight and obviously wasn't used to hearing the word no. He wanted an ice cream and his parents said no because they had just had candy floss. The kid started shouting and whining. Parents still said no. This teenage child then proceeded to stare down his parents, slowly get on the floor and then scream and cry and thrash around, having a full-on toddler tantrum right in the middle of the castle. The second his parents gave in, he stopped screaming and crying, got up and calmly walked to the ice cream place. My nephew turned to us and said, "What a baby," and went to go look at the trebuchet. lived in a condo and came home from work to see a small child no older than 7 crying outside the entrance door. It was -1 out, so it was extremely cold out. I let her inside and we walked to her condo. Knocked on her door but no answer. I sat on the stairs with her and called the police. The cops came and I went down to my condo. After 15 minutes the police knocked on my door and told me what happened. The mom was home the entire time. She deliberately wouldn't buzz her kid in as punishment for forgetting the key code and waking her up with a buzzer. It was ducking 1 outside. Well, my parents both turned into alcoholics when I was 8. And I basically didn't see them despite living with them. Until after I moved out at 16. I was a nanny for 3 months for a family who ignored their child's special needs. The youngest daughter had mild behavioral issues and developmental delays. But her parents would either ignore her needs or call her outbursts cute. The parents knew she had to wear glasses to prevent degradation of her eyesight, but since the girl didn't like them, she didn't have to wear them. They had 3 kids between the ages of 10 and 13 and I've never met such spoiled kids. We couldn't get through a board game without someone crying and throwing something. They would whine to their parents until they gave in. The older daughter called her mother worthless to her face because she wouldn't take her to the pool. Several tantrums a day and phone calls to their mom every 20 minutes were considered normal. The mom pretty much let them run the roost. The whole time I was taking care of them, they never had a single play date. No other kids wanted to be around them. I finally quit because the oldest girl told me daily that I was not doing my job correctly. Stupid brat.